It started with something as simple as a stack of firewood, yet somehow it spiraled into the kind of neighborhood chaos you only hear about in late-night confession threads. One morning, half my firewood was gone. The next morning, all of it vanished. I thought it was petty theft until I discovered the real reason the HOA board didn't want me storing wood at all. Their Karen-in-chief had a secret she was desperate to hide, and my backyard was right in the middle of it. But when I set a trap to catch her, things escalated into something none of us expected. So tell me, how far would your HOA go to control you? I moved into the neighborhood expecting quiet evenings, friendly nods from passing dog walkers, and the kind of small, comfortable routines people brag about when they finally escape the city. My place sat at the edge of a cul-de-sac, tall trees, crisp air, and a backyard deep enough that you could hear birds instead of traffic. It felt like the kind of community where people borrowed sugar, waved from their driveways, and minded their own business. At least, that's what I believed during those first few calm weeks. Most mornings I stacked fresh firewood along the fence line, not because I needed to, but because splitting logs at sunset was my way of clearing my head after work. It became part of my rhythm, something I looked forward to, and for a while nobody said a word about it. But slowly little things began to feel off. A neighbor who used to smile started watching me from behind her curtains. HOA newsletters started appearing more frequently, thinly veiled reminders about property, uniformity, and community-aligned storage expectations. I brushed it off as typical HOA noise. Every neighborhood had a few people who loved rules more than peace. Still, there was something strangely sharp in the tone of those letters, something aimed directly at me, even if it wasn't written out loud. And each time I stacked another row of wood, I could feel eyes on me. Quiet judging, waiting. I didn't know it yet, but that simple pile of firewood, so harmless, so ordinary, was about to light the fuse on a conflict that would take over my entire life. The first real sign of trouble came folded beneath my doormat. A bright white HOA notice with bold red lettering across the top. It claimed my firewood was improperly stored, creating visual disharmony and inviting pests. 3 accusations, none of which were true, but all of which felt suspiciously personal. I'd lived long enough to know the difference between a general reminder and a targeted warning. This one had my name written all over it. I walked the yard that afternoon, scanning the fence line, trying to see what they saw. The logs were stacked neatly, tied off, and covered from the rain. Not a single piece out of place. Yet the letter insisted I remove all wood piles within 72 hours to avoid a fine. It read less like a guideline and more like a threat, the kind of message someone drafts when they're not asking, but demanding. Over the next few days, more envelopes appeared. First, a $50 fine for non-compliance, then $75 for continued aesthetic violation, then $100 for environmental hazard. Meanwhile, my neighbors' yards had garden tools, broken planters, bikes leaning on fences, but no one else seemed to receive warnings. Only me, only the firewood, only the fence line that backed up to the home of the HOA president herself. It didn't take long to notice the pattern. Whenever I worked outside, she seemed to magically appear, sweeping her porch, trimming a bush, checking for weeds, always watching me, always pretending not to. Her eyes followed every piece of firewood like it was contraband. And every time I ignored a notice, another one showed up within a day, almost like she timed them around my movements. Then the real harassment started. My security lights began shutting off at random. The lock on my backyard gate was tampered with. Small piles of wood went missing, first a few logs, then a full row. At first, I blamed raccoons or kids messing around. But logs don't just vanish without noise, and raccoons definitely don't sort through piles as if they're looking for something specific. The more I paid attention, the more it became obvious someone was taking them on purpose. Not for firewood, not for warmth, but to send a message. The HOA wanted the wood gone, and if I wouldn't remove it myself, they'd find another way. I tried speaking to a few neighbors, casually asking if they'd noticed anything strange. The responses were vague, cautious. One neighbor simply shrugged like my question never reached his ears. Another smiled too quickly, then rushed inside. People didn't want to get involved. And honestly, I didn't blame them. The HOA president had a reputation, quiet but intimidating, the kind of woman who made grown adults rewrite their landscaping plans just to avoid her disapproval. The moment that truly pushed things over the edge came one night after midnight. I woke to a faint crunching outside and the slow, deliberate moving along the fence line. When I stepped onto the porch, the noise stopped instantly. The backyard was still, almost unnaturally silent. But when I checked the wood pile in the morning, 3 stacks were missing. Gone, cleaned out. No mess, no scraps, no trail. Whoever took them knew exactly what they were doing. Something else bothered me too. The ground near the fence was disturbed. Not from dragging wood, but from someone kneeling, crouching, searching. Almost like they weren't stealing the wood, but investigating it. That idea nagged at me. Why search firewood? Why dig through logs? Why care so much about something that had been sitting there harmlessly for weeks? Unless the wood wasn't the real problem. From that point on, the HOA letters grew more aggressive, hinting at legal action, threatening to suspend my membership privileges, whatever that meant. Each envelope tightened the noose a little more. It wasn't just about wood anymore, it was about power, control, and making sure I followed their rules without question. And then came the notice that finally made me snap. A demand for a full property compliance inspection, scheduled without my consent, signed by the HOA president herself. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a simple neighbor dispute. Someone wanted something in my backyard, and they were willing to break the rules they claimed to protect just to get it. But if they thought they were the only ones capable of digging for answers, they were about to learn how wrong they were. The day of the mandatory property inspection arrived with an uncomfortable quiet that settled over the cul-de-sac like fog. The HOA president didn't come alone. She arrived with 2 board members, clipboards in hand, wearing the smug confidence of people who believed they'd already won. They didn't knock. They didn't greet me. They simply walked into my yard as if it already belonged to them. Their eyes went straight to the fence line, searching for the firewood they'd been obsessing over for weeks, and for the first time they froze. The wood was back, stacked neatly, perfectly uniform, but this time, different. Hollow logs, lightweight, suspiciously identical. I had spent the entire night preparing them, setting them exactly where the last stacks had been stolen. The president's expression tightened. She stepped forward quickly, too quickly, like someone desperate to confirm a fear. She grabbed a log, shook it, then pried at its end with her fingernail, and when she realized the wood was hollow, something inside her cracked. Her face drained of color. Her hands trembled. She turned to the board members, eyes wide with a panic she couldn't hide. That's when I finally spoke, calmly, deliberately. I told them that the missing stacks, the late-night trespassing, the tampered locks, and the pattern of fines had all been documented. I told them the hollow logs were bait, a trap to expose whoever had been sneaking into my yard, and I told them I had the footage to prove everything. The board members shifted uncomfortably, suddenly unsure of the woman who had dragged them into this. But the president, she snapped. She accused me of staging everything. She lunged toward the wood pile, desperate to destroy evidence that hadn't even been revealed yet. And under the pressure of her own panic, she slipped, tumbling hard, sending the hollow logs clattering loudly across the yard like empty shells. The noise drew neighbors from their porches. People watched. People whispered. And for the first time, they saw the truth for themselves. The president, red-faced and frantic, caught in the very act she'd been trying to hide. As she scrambled to her feet, breathless and defeated, one thing became painfully clear. The HOA's power wasn't real anymore, and she knew it. In the days that followed, the neighborhood shifted in a way I'd never seen before. The same people who once avoided eye contact at the mailbox now walked up to me with quiet, apologies, and relieved expressions. Word spread quickly about what really happened, not because I told it, but because half the cul-de-sac had seen the HOA president unravel with their own eyes. And once the board members reviewed the footage I'd captured over the past weeks, there was no debate left to have. By the end of the month, she was formally removed from her position. The fines she issued were voided. The board issued a written apology, tucked in the same spot where they used to leave threats, and for the first time since moving in, my home finally felt like mine again. But the impact went beyond one person. The HOA quietly revised half their bylaws, stripping away vague language that allowed selective enforcement. The new leadership opened meetings to residents, listened to complaints, and, most importantly, stopped pretending that power meant ownership. As for my firewood, it still sits neatly stacked along the fence line. Not a single log has gone missing since. Some neighbors even offered to help chop wood on weekends, turning what once sparked tension into something unexpectedly communal. Looking back, the whole ordeal taught me something I didn't expect. It's frightening how far some people will go to control what isn't theirs. But it's even more powerful what happens when a community finally sees the truth for itself. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Sometimes, the smallest fights reveal the biggest cracks, and once they're exposed, everything changes.